Thank you all very much for joining us, and thank the people on YouTube for joining us. If anybody has any questions about anything, do you have any questions you have now, or any concerns, any comments that you'd like to make before we get started? Okay. Well, then tonight is the chapter 27, the epilogue of the Lalitavistara Sutra. So we've come a long way. I guess it's been about 15 months or something like that. So it's quite, I think, an accomplishment in itself to be able to go through this as thoroughly and as carefully and meaningfully and with a discussion each night to talk about this. So I think it's been very good. Um, so keeping with our format, I think it'd be good to this is about 5 pages, and to have a single reader, I think would be good, a single reciter. So Alex, I see you're with us, and you have your book, and it's been a while since you've been able to have your book and be with us. So I'd like to ask you if you will recite the epilogue, this chapter 27.
Oh, that will be my distinct pleasure.
Okay, very good. So everybody, I'm sure, has your books if you follow along, and if you mark anything that is of interest that you want to talk about, please do that so that at the end we can have a nice discussion. Alex, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good reading glasses. All right. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
All right. Chapter 27, Epilogue. The gods who had requested this Dharma teaching from Dasgan one, were now gathered for the turning of the wheel of Dharma. In total, there were more than 18,000 divine beings from the pure realms, led by such beings as Maheshvara, Nanda, Sunanda, Kandana, Mahita, Santa, Prasanta, and Vinitesvara. At that point, the Dasganvan addressed the divine beings headed by Maheshvara, who had come from the pure realms, in the following way. Friends, this sutra, known as the Play in Full, is a very extensive account of the Bodhisattva's playful activity. It constitutes an introduction to the play that is the domain of the Buddha. The Dasganvan has taught it to introduce himself. So now you should absorb it, preserve it, and cause it to be retold. In this way, this Dharma method of mine will spread. When the followers of Bodhisattva vehicle hear this teaching, they will develop an extremely steadfast diligence. Those beings that develop a strong inclination to attain unsurpassable and perfect awakening will develop a strength that brings down a rain of the great teaching. The demons will be destroyed. All those who proclaim different doctrines will not make their appearance. Your request to teach this Dharma will become a root of virtue, very valuable, yielding great benefits and earning the great praise. Friends, whoever joins his palms in respect to these Dharma teachings of the Plain Full will attain 8 supreme attributes. What are these 8? These are to attain a supreme body, supreme strength, supreme retinue, supreme presence of mind, supreme renunciation, supreme purity of thoughts, supreme level of meditative concentration, and supreme manifestation of insight. These are the 8 supreme attributes that one will attain. Friends, whoever set up a throne for the Dharma teacher, who wishes to expound his Dharma teaching of the plain full, will attain 8 desirable positions as soon as he sets up the throne. What are these 8? They are position of a merchant, a householder, a universal monarch, a world protector, chakra, Vashavartin, Brahma, a non-returning bodhisattva who has reached the supreme essence of awakening, sits on a lion throne, and vanquishes the attacks of demons, and a Buddha who has reached perfect and unsurpassable awakening and sits on a throne of turning the wheel of Dharma. These are the 8 desirable positions that one will attain. Friends, whoever applauds a Dharma teacher expounding these Dharma teachings of the plain full will attain 8 purities of speech. Those are what are these 8? With the pure action of speech that accords with the truth, others will do as one says. With the pure action of speech that overwhelms one's audience, one's words will be accepted. With the pure action of not being ignored, one's words will be heeded. Peacefully gathering pins, one will speak pleasantly and softly. By satisfying bodies and minds of one's voice will be like the voice of the cuckoo bird. The uniting beings, one will have one's say. By outshining all voices, one will have a voice like Brahman. By not being dominated by any propagators of other doctrines, one will have a voice like a roar of a lion. By satisfying the sense faculties of all sentient beings, one will have the voice of a Buddha. Those are 8 purities of speech that one will attain. Friends, whoever puts this Dharma teaching of the plain full into writing and carries, venerates, respects, honors, and pays homage to it while praising this Dharma teaching into the 4 directions without any feeling of miserliness, saying, "Come here, write this teaching down, hold it, pass it on, reflect on it, memorize it well," they shall attain 8 great treasures. What are these 8 great treasures? They are the treasure of unfailing recall because of not forgetting, the treasure of intelligence by careful analysis, the treasure of realization by assimilating enthusiastically the meaning of all the sutras, the treasure of memorization by remembering everything that one hears, the treasure of confidence by satisfying all sentient beings with good counsel, the treasure of Dharma by preserving the true Dharma, the treasure of the mind of awakening by maintaining the lineage of the 3 jewels, and the treasure of accomplishment by developing receptiveness to the truth of non-origination. These are the 8 treasures that one will attain. Friends, whoever teaches this Dharma, teaching of the play in full, and explains it in full respect, and explains it, will perfect 8 accumulations. What are these 8? They are generosity by being free of miserliness, discipline by perfecting all virtuous intentions, learning by accomplishing unattached knowledge, calm abiding through actualizing all meditative states and equilibriums, insight through perfecting knowledge by means of the threefold knowledge, merit by refining the excellent marks and the adornments of the Buddha realms, wisdom by satisfying the inclinations of all sentient beings, and great compassion because of never tiring of ripening all sentient beings. These are the 8 accumulations that one will perfect. Friends, whoever has this outlook and thinking that other sentient beings should receive this instruction, teaches this Dharma teaching of the play in full elaborately, will attain 8 forms of merit through this virtuous cause. What are these 8? The first of these 8 great types of merit results in becoming a universal monarch. The second great merit results in becoming a supreme ruler in the heaven of the 4 great kings. The third great merit results in becoming Chakra, Lord of the Gods. The fourth great merit results in becoming the god Suyama. The fifth great merit results in becoming Santushita. The sixth great merit results in becoming Sunirmanarari. The seventh great merit results in becoming Vashavartin, the king of gods. The eighth from the Maha Brahma heaven. Finally, one becomes Das Ganwan, a worthy one, a perfectly awakened one, free from all unvirtuous dharmas and endowed with all the virtuous ones. These are the 8 great merits that one will attain. Friends, whoever listens attentively to this Dharma teaching of the play in full, as it is being explained, will gain 8 pure mind states. What are these 8? They are love in order to conquer all anger, compassion in order to abandon all ill will, sympathetic joy in order to clear away all depression, equanimity in order to abandon desire and anger, the 4 concentrations in order to master the entire desire realm, 4 equilibriums of the formless realm in order to master the mind, the 5 types of higher knowledge in order to travel to other Buddha realms, and the ability to conquer all traces of habitual tendencies in order to attain the meditative concentration of the heroic gate. These are the 8 pure mind states that one will attain. Friends, wherever this Dharma teaching, the play in full is found, whether in a village, in a city, a market, an uninhabited place, a district, a courtyard, or a temple, the 8 fears will not manifest except from the ripening of past actions. What are these 8? They are the fears of the troubles caused by first rulers, second thieves, third malicious beings, fourth starvation in a wilderness, fifth fights, quarrels and disputes, sixth gods, seventh nagas, eighth yakshas, and all types of misfortune. Other than the ripening of the previous actions, my friends, these 8 fears will no longer occur. Friends, in short, even if the lifespan of the thus gone one were to last for an eon, and even if he were to praise these Dharma teachings uninterruptedly day and night, he would not be able to end his praise of this Dharma teaching. And his inspired speech would still continue. Friends, the discipline, absorption, knowledge, liberation, and wisdom vision of liberation of the thus gone one is immeasurable and boundless. For this reason, my friends, if anyone develops the wish that others receive this vast teaching and subsequently memorizes this Dharma teaching, carries it, propagates it, writes it down, or commissions it to be written, comprehends it, and teaches it elaborately to his congregation, then their merit shall also be boundless. Then the thus gone one announced to Venerable Mahakasyapa, Venerable Ananda, and the Bodhisattva great Maitreya, friends, the unsurpassable and perfect awakening that I have accomplished through limitless billions of eons, I now place in your hands. I entrust you with the supreme entrustment. Now you should keep this teaching with you and teach it elaborately to others. When he had said this, the Blessed One uttered the following verses in order to pass on his Dharma teaching more fully. If the beings whom I see with my Buddha eye were all worthy ones equal to Shariputra, and if someone would make for millions of eons, offerings to them, equal in number to sands of grains in the Ganges, the merit of this would be surpassed if one would joyfully make offerings of garlands and the like to a single solitary Buddha, even for just a single day and night. If all sentient beings were solitary Buddhas, and someone were to offer with great attention flowers, perfumes, and ornaments continually over several eons, that merit would be greatly surpassed if someone were to offer a single thus gone one, a single prostration accompanied by a devoted attitude, and say, homage to the Holy One. And if all sentient beings were Buddhas, and someone were to worship, as just explained, with divine flowers and the most precious flowers of this world, for many eons, with many kinds of offerings, that merit would be greatly surpassed if someone at this time when the sacred Dharma is degenerating, gives up concern for his body and life, and recites this sutra for a single day and night. Whoever wishes to venerate the guides, and likewise the solitary Buddhas and the listeners, should give steady rise to the mind of awakening, and always keep this sutra firmly in mind. This is the king of all good advice, given by all Dasganvans. Wherever this jewel of sutra is found, in that house the Dasganvan always resides. Whoever gives this sutra to the others or recites just a single word, for millions of eons he shall never stray either from its words or its meaning, and thus attain limitless eloquence and virtue. Whoever hears this teaching and puts it into practice shall not only be an unsurpassable guide of humans, but a being without equal, inexhaustible like the ocean. When the Blessed One, the exalted Lord, had spoken, the gods from the pure realms headed by Maheshvara and all the bodhisattvas, the great beings headed by Maitreya, the great listeners headed by Mahakashyapa, and the entire world with its gods, humans, demigods, and Gandharvas rejoiced and at the Blessed One's teaching. This concludes the 27th chapter, the epilogue, and completes the noble, great vehicle sutra, the play in full.
Om Ahung. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for participating in this. Please, does anyone have comments about this epilogue and how it relates to the rest of the play in full?
Lance 27.11, did anybody else chuckle at what the first of the 8 fears was? Ruler.
Caused by rulers.
May God keep the czar and keep him far from me, as they say in Fiddler on the Roof. So the more things change, that's all.
Yeah.
Alex, did you have a comment?
Not many things changed since this time. Well, my comment was I didn't want to this sound like a joke, but gives you a clue why are we sitting here and doing this. So now the mystery revealed why Brother Lance Pemedorje was so diligent in compiling this treasure and delivering and helping us organize here and read aloud, bringing a lot of merit to everybody. A lot of good benefits.
Well, thank you. Yes. Hopefully everyone received a good confidence in being able to enter into a study, into a practice to its conclusion. Kunga, do you have a comment? Any particular aspect of this?
I was just reading through the different categories of 8. I don't know. I don't have a particular comment right now.
Okay. Did this seem to, this epilogue, do you think this did a good job in inspiring, a reader to not only connect with this, but to be able to present this to others, to be able to at least be a light, guiding people to the wisdom and the compassion that's included in the play in full.
I'll answer that. It to me, it underscored and highlighted some of the potential benefits that, I mean, I certainly couldn't think of, but was great to bring into attention, and hope that this will be such a fruition eventually. When we started, of course, it also brings into awareness that just one reading will not be enough to get all these great benefits. That it will need to be studied again and again to read all these profound methods and wisdom that acquired through contemplation and just recitation and sharing this sutra.
Thank you. Yes. Zara, do you have any comment? I know that you have been able to view the YouTube when you've not been present, and I know that you've been reading the text and everything. What has this meant to you?
I wondered, Alex, I was just listening to you, and I wondered if for those of you who've been with Lance in the beginning, have you transformed in the last year? And because Alex, the comment you just made, I have transformed since reading these sutras, Lance, like in a very intentional, skillful way. These have been key in helping me integrate everything, if that makes sense, the concepts, the knowledge. And this is so like just focused, right? Because this is the original source. We started last February, right?
Actually, I think January.
Coming into May. This is like doing a doctoral study program, like a master's, a long graduate course in these scriptures. I think everyone should be really proud of themselves to have, come this way. And this has transformed my life for sure. So these are my initial thoughts. And Brendan, I did chuckle at that verse 27:11. Thank you. Thank you for reading, Alex.
So, Bernie, how would you comment about this?
About
The
the whole
chapter.
sutra?
Well, the chapter, the epilogue, and the whole sutra.
Well, the chapter is something you also always usually many times you find that in Mahayana sutras. Is the first the Buddha, and in this case we don't have the traditional ending. The traditional ending is first Ananda asks a name for the sutra, and the Buddha says, "Please call this sutra by such and such a name," and then he entrusts the sutra to one or more bodhisattvas, and then they go on here, as they do here, they talk about the merit of teaching, reciting, propagating the particular sutra. And so in that respect, it's traditional ending for a Mahayana sutra. And of course, we have the sort of grab bag of meritorious results you can get by doing so. It's basically a list of the sort of results that come from great merit, and there's nothing unusual about that. You avoid negative karma, and you develop good karma, good rebirths, and all that. And it's interesting, but not really doesn't explain much in terms of Buddhist philosophy in the last chapter, of course, except the idea of karma, if you want to consider that. And the rest of the text, of course, it's as I said before, it's the story of the enlightenment of the Buddha with a bunch of doctrinal material interwoven into it in various places. So it just is a, a greater elaboration of the traditional story of the Buddha's enlightenment, and it has a bunch of, as I said, a bunch of doctrinal material in there as well. Of course, we've gone over that at length, so there's not much point in saying much about it right now. But it's helpful. It's helpful. It's always helpful to review the Dharma. This is considered Mahayana Dharma, but it isn't so difficult as a lot of Mahayana Dharma is. The teachings on emptiness and Buddha nature, which are difficult to comprehend. It's more aimed at a level of your typical layman. And of course, there is some more difficult stuff in there, but at a general level, this seems to be a text aimed at your typical Buddhist layman rather than at monks or philosophers or anything like that. That's my opinion of it. Right now, I don't know what more to say at this point.
Okay, thank you. For myself, it's kind of it's helped me to slow down and to methodically go through, each of the chapters, each of the verses of the chapter, and so on, and really think about these things, contemplate, and in some cases, it's kind of, I have a sense of being released, a sense of freedom that some of these verses and chapters have given to me personally, and being able to share that with everybody is really, I think, a wonderful thing. I can't think of anything better. When my teacher would come to the temple, and to be able to share my teacher with the temple, and to be able to share certain books or certain passages, but to share this really has a very special meaning. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity, and the kind of thing that we can go back to over and over again. For me, one of the best sections in here were the gateways to enlightenment. I forget exactly how it was expressed, but it was very clear, and it was a great way to be able to think about, what am I doing on the path? So I don't have it in front of me. I'm not prepared to quote from it or anything, but it was just the idea of the gateways, that there are these gateways, and where are you in terms of those gateways, I think was very meaningful for me, something that has stayed with me throughout all this reading.
Yeah,
I think,
I also want to uh, second what Zara said, that it was transformative, even in many ways that we don't maybe realize yet. But the ideas that get into our mind, I think we will see how they will sprout and flourish. Will be interesting to see, and just having this kind of comprehensive view of path of Buddha from, even before his birth, before he was born on earth, and after, and up to this point when he basically at the height of his teaching career, so to speak, having this expounded as one continuous flow of story and, well, the play is something very special, I think, to have it all and in so many details I never heard before or could never even suspect that there are such details. And some of the details are very, very valuable and very insightful. And I'll keep pondering on them for a long time, I guess.
Yes, thank you.
There are a lot of meaning.
What do you think about, the point that there's a process, and this really gave a distinct view of what that process is, in the sense of it being the Buddha who attained this. Siddhartha Gautama then became the thus gone one. And once he became the thus gone one, that process continued and so on. Did it help you to recognize or to have confidence in the process? That we've talked about it many times as a graduated path and so on, the way it's been explained many times. Does it give you confidence in that process?
Lance, yes, for me it does, because I can recognize between reading the previous sections and this one where I am, development in a spiritual developmental sequence, which is great because that helps me self-assess opportunities for growth and feel a little bit more stable in the process. That makes sense from a point of compassion, because it's definitely super easy to get off track with the samsaric ignorance and veils we have to go through every 24 hours. And this helps me just kind of go back and refresh and see where I am. And I'm a different person than I was when we started last February. And I mean, Lance, you're aware of some of the other things I'm doing privately to help me, but I think this has been a game changer to read the source, not only just do the 3-year program, but this is, yeah, I mean, and everyone here probably has exposure to like reading a Bible or some other holy book, scriptures. And so this is just really special that we got to do this. So thank you.
Thank you. So I've heard it said that the perfection of enlightenment is being on the path, recognizing that there is a path and being on the path, doing what you need to do to stay on the path and have the resources to help yourself when you wander away from the path, because that's part of our human nature, our habitual tendencies, not being perfect realized beings, that we will do that. But to use this and other scripture like this, as guides for us to keep ourselves on the path. Otherwise, we fall under the prey of nefarious rulers and those who wish to manipulate ourselves and populations, etc. And all the craziness that we see, the world going into all kinds of directions of intense greed, of intense ill will, born out of intense delusion, because so many beings have no spiritual ground on which to evaluate their lives and what the world is going through. So, it gives us a personal guide, but it also, inspires us to recognize that we have a voice in all of society and to find ways to exercise that voice. It may not be immediately apparent, and for most of us here, we still have we got half of our lives yet to go. And, what we can do to raise our voice and to allow it to be heard, especially in times of great difficulty. While you were just talking, Zara, I went to book number 1 just to look at the table of contents again. And, it's great. And, to go through that and to say, oh, wow, there's a few chapters here which I would love to reread. I just made a point of the gateways. It's chapter 4, the gateways to the light of the Dharma. And many of them, those gateways, will be familiar to us because not only have we studied it, but personally we've opened that up. It's been our own gnosis. That's where it really happens, isn't it? To have a vicarious learning about it from teachers or reading books. But when you realize it yourself, when you have that personal gnosis, that's where the enlightenment comes. That's where the liberation comes, because once you achieve that, you're never going back. Has anybody had that kind of experience? Any kind of sense of that kind of gnosis? Kunga, what about you?
I was interested. I was thinking about that today, and about how I spend my time. And basically I was at work today, and my job is really just I went into that work because I wanted to have more experience, firsthand experience of impermanence, and also have that ability to just really serve people in a day-to-day way. And when I got home, I worked out, and I was working out. I was listening to some teachings on Lojong on audio, and then when I was done with that, I was eating dinner and I was reading a commentary on Lojong from a different writer, and then I was sitting with this group, and I pretty much started out the morning doing my Nundro practice. I mean, that's pretty much all I do all day. It's my practice. And I've seen that increase over the years, especially in the last couple of years. I think of this, spending 15 months looking at this particular sutra is pretty interesting. This isn't a particular sutra that I would have picked up and investigated in that depth on my own. I tend to look at more at commentaries or on sutras. So I thought it was a good experience. Hey, at least that's 2 hours that day that I wasn't spend ruminating on something unskillful. So thank you.
Do you feel like, do you think that you have, kind of really immersed your life in Dharma?
Yeah,
like
it's pretty immersed.
Huh?
It's pretty immersed, yeah. There's not
Yeah.
much else going on. I mean, when we're doing stuff that's not directly related to my Buddhist studies, I'm just trying to be mindful and be present and be skillful. Yeah.
Anybody else like to comment on that? Somebody had, how much time do you spend, in the Dharma, working in the Dharma, or just kind of relaxing in the Dharma, or even, like maybe watching a film or having a conversation, but then while you're watching, while you're having a conversation, you're thinking about the Dharma. You're thinking about, well, how, what's the delusion here? What's the ill will? What's the confusion or something like that, whether it's yours or somebody else's. Brendan, do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, I'll say a little bit about that. So I do have a lot of Buddhist books. It takes me a lot longer than I would like to get through them, but I do try to read quite frequently something involving the Dharma. I was riding with my daughter in the car the other day, one of my daughters, and we were talking about Elizabeth. So we were talking about the Tao of all things. And in my past, and I joke that my life today resembles Homer Simpson a lot more than James Bond, and that would have made my 16-year-old self cry. But now I said to her, the Tao took me in the path it took me, and that's okay. And rather than getting angry and resisting and saying, well, why is this my path? This is a great path. I have gratitude. And so I think that things that I read, things that I think inspire me and are moments of gnosis. As you asked about, Lance, I'm reading a book. I mentioned this guy, Daniel Pinchbeck, who's an expert on shamanism. And he talks about this fellow who ingested iboga in an African ritual and was told in a vision the exact date of his death. And it turned out that was correct. That is when he died. So, there's coming back to what we just read tonight, something I've been thinking about a lot. 27:25, and we hear about Mahisvara and all the bodhisattvas and Maitreya and Mahakasipa and all of these different spiritual beings. And this is something we talked about a few weeks ago. If I were to say, well, I'm just here to meditate and I'm just here to learn about the Four Noble Truths and all this stuff, I can't prove this. No, what this has taught me is humility. And it's taught me that if I'm sitting here just questioning everything and dismissing everything because I can't empirically prove it or understand it, then I'm missing the point. The point is to immerse myself in this Dharma teaching and immerse myself in these sutras, and from a position of humility, say, what can I learn? What do I have? What does this have to teach me? And I think that when I do that, it's gnosis. And something that I was thinking about recently, Zara and I were talking a long time ago about how she likes to go through her neighborhood and pick up trash. Remember that, Zara? And how I do the same thing. And Zara's thought was, this is good. I'm helping the community and I'm helping people out. And for the longest time, my thought was, what's with all the litter bugs? Why are they doing this? Don't they know how they're cluttering the neighborhood? And I would get so angry. And I'm happy to say that now my attitude is more like Zara's, that I'm doing a service for the neighborhood and for people, and I'm making things look better in the neighborhood. And there's no reason to get mad at people. Never ask the world for something I cannot give you. And one thing the world cannot give us is a world free of people that litter. So we just accept that and we go ahead and pick up the trash. And so, Lance, that's all I've got for right now.
Thank you. So Bernie, guys like you and me, we've been doing this for a long time. You've been doing it for a lot longer than me, and you've read a lot more than I have, and so on like that. But how give us an inspiration as to how this has made a difference in your life, or maybe it's not made a difference.
Well, how this class has made a difference in my life? My point of view is that in the first half of your life, you receive, in the second half, you give back. And I view my practice of the Dharma now as giving back to the community that I received it from. And of course, I'm still receiving. I'm not saying I received nothing, but my principal motivation for doing the Dharma these days is to give back to other people what's possible, the little bit that I've learned of the Dharma. And that's been my motivation for this class as well as for all the classes that I attend. And so I don't know. I can't say anything more than that right now.
Okay. Well, let me ask Alex. Alex is a scientist, and how do the science of phenomenal nature is one thing, and the science of spirituality is another. Do you see it that way, or can you comment on that idea?
Well, to me, the reason perhaps I stuck with Buddhism and exploring different traditions, including Tibetan and Pure Land and what Mahayana, Vajrayana, is it is very experiential and I would say not overly dogmatic. Let's put it that way. There is certain things you have to take with a grain, like with some trust, with some faith, even with some acceptance. But it's not really the core essence of the teaching. The core essence you have to experience for yourself and apply it and see how it works, and debate also. Debate with your friends, with your spiritual teachers, with even with people who are not of Buddhist faith, and it is great. And here we in the Sutra, we also see that although there are sometimes references that this Dharma is so great that it's incomparable to any other teaching, it's not really like putting the other teachings down. It's just saying that this one is really great. So it kind of encouraging to engage in all kind of debates and exploration in that way. So like in science, you learn something, then you try wrap your mind around it, and then perhaps make some kind of prediction or change your behavior, change your attitude towards something based on your insight. And that is very similar to what we do, in Buddhism. We learn, we hear the stories, we observe what's happening to ourselves. We then sit down, meditate, contemplate, abiding calmly and trying to get into clarity about things. And if we don't get that, we may debate with somebody and come back and look for more clarity inside ourselves, or help by looking through, commentary, and evolve. So our knowledge of our own understanding, our place in here on planet Earth, among human beings, among the gods. Well, science doesn't talk about gods, but we have a even wider kind of field of view, field of contemplation and exploration than we have in science. So it is much more than science, I would say, to me. So, it is very different domain. It's dealing with things that cannot be easily like touched or seen, right? But it brings also awareness that we do have these internal organs, so to quote unquote, internal organs of seeing and vision and hearing that let us comprehend truths that couldn't be put on in words or equations or things like that. But once we arrive at those truths, those insights, it's hard to undo that. Just like understanding why 2 + 2 = 4, nobody will ever convince you that 2 + 2 = 5. And also talking about fears, when you study science, you lose a lot of fears as well. You may understand, like, okay, bacteria are everywhere. There are only certain kinds that we need to be really, concerned about. Sun may eventually blow up and consume Earth. All right, maybe in a million years, maybe tomorrow, when there is like huge, sun outbursts. So no need to be anxious about, uncertain future and things like that. So
Thank you.
I see lots of parallels here, of course. I don't want to take up all your time today.
I just finished reading a book about Buddhism and as a social theory about how Buddhism can be an influence in being able to help guide civilization, if you will, in a healthy way and so on. And so it falls back on using greed as what's been happening, ill will that's been happening, and delusion that's what's been happening. And the antidotes, the things to overcome those three are generosity overcomes greediness, and mindfulness, samadhi, overcomes ill will, and education or wisdom overcomes delusion, and so on. And it makes the point that we are connected to all things. It's easier for us to connect with other human beings to the point where we can say, well, we have an ego. Each one of us has an ego, but there also is a we-go. That's the term they use in this book, the we-go. That all of mankind has this common collective ego called the we-go, and that we have a dynamic relationship with that. We can make a difference. It makes a difference on us, and so on. So so that with humankind and with the rest of nature, and not just the animal world, not just the insect world, not just the spiritual world, but physical things like the earth itself and the trees and other things that are beyond our immediate control, out in space and so on like that. But thinking specifically about the earth and so on, that there is a direct connection that we have with that. And so this study of the play in full, I think, there were episodes, there were parts of that were reminding us that we do have that dynamic relationship with other beings. We do have that dynamic relationship with the earth, with the world. And to take that up and to really make that as part of our practice, of part of our understanding, and to develop realization out of it, and to change, to recognize what changes we can manifest. Anybody have any comment about that? Do you think of yourself as in terms of other people? Do you think of yourself in terms of being part and parcel of the earth, and that you have a relationship with the earth, with the world. Kunga.
Well, I mean, if it wasn't for the universe, we wouldn't be here. And if we weren't here, the universe would be a very different place. I think there's a back and forth between the two. I mean, we could certainly see with global warming how human beings are affecting the atmosphere and the earth itself and how it works. And, we've been doing that ever since life started on Earth. There's always been an inner back and forth between life on the planet, life as individual cells and life, the planet as an environment. Those two things can't really be separated at a deep level. So it sounded like what you're talking about was like this like individual versus collective when you're talking about the ego and the we go, right? So individual and collective. It made me think about karma, about this idea about, we have our individual karma, our individual actions ripening around us. And then we also have this like collective karma. Just as human beings, we've sort of created certain things that seem to be happening, as a mass culture. Since we're all interconnected, defining out what's individual and what's collective, I think can be tricky. But maybe we're just talking about something from different perspectives. When we were talking about this section on fear, the eight fears, before it describes the eight fears, it says, the eight fears will not manifest except from the ripening of past actions. And then it says the same thing at the end. Other than the ripening of previous actions, my friends, these eight fears will no longer occur. So it made me think about that. Is anything occurring that's not ripening of past actions, really? I mean, is there anything that occurs that's not a ripening of past actions? Maybe it's saying that, through understanding these teachings, we can work towards stopping ourselves from committing actions that are going to ripen into these fears. The actions that we've already committed in the past, those are already ripening away. But maybe we can, from this point forward, stop, these type of unskillful activities that result in these fears being realized or ripening. Thank you.
Thank you. Has this, you think, the study of this and so on this past year, this sutra, has it helped you to see your Buddha within yourself? Or was that already formed, or is it still something that's separate?
Lance, are you asking the question about whether we understood that conceptually with that Buddha, like little b, is in us? Is that what you mean?
Experientially, have you better realize the Buddha within yourself?
Since we've done the sutra studies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Chapter 4 was game changing for me in the previous sutras, the gateways section. I literally just started joking with someone about teaching kids just to say thank you, gratitude, right? Because it protects against malice and vengeance, right? So teaching, I was just thinking, because I always think about Dharma, the way we spread Dharma can be in different ways through different actions. But for me, I always try to create the context for people to accumulate virtue and merit, right? Because for me, I see what's obvious. I just need to do it more and deal with my headspace, my thoughts, but I know the actions. But I find one of the ways I've grown, Lance, is seeing that the beauty of, and even for us, is that we can now create the context for others. We don't have to call it Buddhism. We don't have to say, oh, you're engaging in virtue or merit. But hey, you want to write a thank you card with me? Or Brendan, hey, let's pick up some trash. That's virtuous and that's merit. And then you can talk about it at some point. But that's what I've seen also shift for me, Lance, is like, I don't have to talk about Buddhism or the Dharma necessarily so strictly in this way. I can just start teaching and living it through examples. But that chapter specifically was game changing because it was very action oriented. So then I'm like constantly thinking, how can I help other beings engage in virtue without selling it as, oh, Buddhism, right? Because right off the top, right? Like where I can naturally do that, but I'm like, let's go plant a flower. Let's go take flowers to that sick person. High five. Good job. So,
Yeah, can anybody else comment on that? Did anybody think, years ago or sometime before or whatever, did you think that, Buddha was out there? Buddha was like God. Buddha was like, the saints or whatever other spiritual beings, they're out there, you know. And has this helped you to recognize that it's within yourself? Yes, Alex.
Yes, it certainly helped to put kind of human face, so to speak, not human face, but um, a live, personal, like on earth face on Buddha's character and 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 being here. So he has as a historical figure. It's very easy, hearing all the teachings and you know going through um, sadhanas, practice texts, and some commentaries. It's easy to get an idea of Buddha as some sort of mythological creature, as some almost like a god that um, unreachable and uh, totally idealized. But here we had opportunity to see how Buddha was transformed from being a god, like from small caps god, then maybe into some people may think a god from a big, from written as like creator of all the universe. Uh, m- Maybe not that high, but the king of all gods, basically. All right. And then back into a smaller kind of entity living here with us on Earth and facing his like own limitations that matter, imposes on consciousness. If you believe in consciousness, so to speak. So, and then how he was able to overcome these limitations and basically be not just God, but somebody who is beyond any godness. He transcended his humanity, and he transcended even all the gods that above humanity. So that one of inspiring story, and with all the details that and all the challenges, obstacles, delusions, and seductions that we all also face, in our own life, everyday life, and seeing that as a story that how all of this can be overcome. Abuse as well, and fears of, relative fears of not being understood and not being accepted and all that, and all these different ways that this can be overcome. That is nothing short of life transforming, I have to say. Yes,
Yeah, and for this life,
yes,
in this play in full, it doesn't speak very much about an afterlife. It doesn't speak
exactly.
very much about reincarnation. It talks about, being in this life, being a human being. It talks more about, coming from what might be called a previous life or something like that, you know, but being able to use that as a springboard, if you will, as an impetus for us to further perfect ourselves for the benefit of this life, not thinking about the future life. Did I miss anything by did you do you remember something? Does anybody remember anything in this play in full that spoke, more and more about the afterlife? Do you agree that it was about this life?
Well, of course, it talks about the before life in that it starts with Buddha in the heaven of Tushita. So, in that sense, it's talking about reincarnation and that the Buddha was reborn from Tushita into India in that sense. And it does talk about the merit of being, this last chapter talks about the merit of being reborn as a universal monarch or whatever. So it's talking about it, but you're right, it's not the dominant theme of the text. The dominant theme of the text is the steps, the ultimate steps to attain enlightenment by the Buddha.
There's an
Yeah.
interesting contradiction in the beginning, I thought, where they were where they were this it sort of had this feeling like this was all preordained. Like this was all because he had this past karma, all these well, this play was going to take place, but the script was already there. The Buddha was just kind of going through the role. I mean, I had that feeling like in the beginnings where they were kept talking about, how the Buddha had gone through this before, had experienced this before, it had a strange feeling of where, and I guess I would say I wouldn't recommend this particular sutra to someone new to Buddhism because I feel like in a way it does distance out the Buddha from being an ancient Indian holy man who went through a spiritual practice. He becomes much more than that through this lens, in this sutra. There's such a bigger scope. There's so much more, with all the deities involved and all the homage to the Buddha being paid for in the script. It's just a different feel, I think. I think if I would have, when I was first coming to Buddhism, I would have been turned off by this representation of the Buddha's life. I would have liked something, I don't know if how many people have read Old Path, White Cloud by Thich Nhat Hanh, but it's a very simple, down to earth story of the Buddha's life where he kind of uses he goes through the Buddha's basically just um, going through it from the perspective of mundane life. There's no discussion of the gods at all or the heavens being involved in that story at all. It's very much the Buddha in his practical interactions with his world and in his striving towards his spiritual understanding. So, just very different.
Well, thanks. Let's think about that for a second, because as you were saying that, it made me think that, many of the contemporary, if you want to call it that, religious faiths are motivated by punishment. If you do this, you're going to suffer and all this kind of stuff, and not talking so much. The reward is that you're going to be in heaven, and that's what the gods in Buddhism kind of represent. They're in those heavens and so on. But there is something beyond that. There's a truth, there's a reality beyond that, and it's from that we we come and I think what's being discussed here is trying to manifest that, to manifest the purity of being thus gone from this bed of confusion, this bed of deceit, and so on like that. So I'm thinking out loud a little bit right now, but just from the point of view that so much of contemporary tradition talks about punishment, not so much about the reward and what the reward is. The reward here, I think, is always talking about for the benefit of others. And that's quite different than those other contemporary traditions. Does that make any sense? Brendan, what do you think about that?
I think that when I was a practicing Roman Catholic, I was very, very interested in the crucifixion and not the resurrection, because I identified a lot more with suffering, because I felt that I suffered a lot. And that's one of the things that brought me to Buddhism, right? Was the First Noble Truth. However, I realize now that Buddhism is definitely a religion, well, philosophy, religion, whatever you want to call it, of optimism. So what am I saying? What's the point I'm making about punishment? Yeah, I think, well, I think that Lance is right, that there is an emphasis on punishment. One thing, I'll crystallize this. One thing I read recently is the term unskillful. So it's not that you're doing something that's sinful or evil, it's that you're doing something that's unskillful. It's unskillful. And so from a Buddhist perspective, which I found very enlightening, that it's I mean, I shouldn't joke like this, but I was saying, well, so if you drop a bomb on a hospital, is that unskillful as opposed to evil? But I guess you could kind of think in a way, yeah, I guess perhaps it is unskillful. So anyway, Lance, I have less intelligent to say about that than I thought I did. So I'll send it back to you.
No, I think that was a good point. I think, your initial point of it's more about punishment than it is about the resurrection.
Yeah, I mean, there is a resurrection and people celebrate Easter, which we're going to celebrate in less than a week. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of focus on the suffering and the that aspect. And
So the question is, do you see the resurrection in our Buddha practice?
oh yes, yes, I do. Yes, very much so. It's liberating. Buddhism is liberating because you have the Four Noble Truths and then you have the Dharma path. And yeah, to me, it kind of puts things in perspective that when you have this healthy sense of detachment from the outcome or from how you might suffer, like in the West, we're so worried about material comforts and having a bigger house and having enough to eat and all these things that are important things. I mean, don't get me wrong, these are important things, but I mean, the Buddha Shakyamuni, he had all that stuff and he left that palace. And so I think it lived as a samana. So I mean, his example, I think, is tremendous. So yes, that takes me away from the suffering as a Buddhist. Buddhism's all about alleviating suffering, isn't it, Lance? For all sentient beings. That's the whole point of this exercise. It's not to get right with your creator or repent and be baptized. It's to alleviate your own suffering and that of others.
Right, the dukkha, the suffering. Yes, Alex.
Well, in this context of this discussion, I think, for example, reading this sutra, or like to me, Buddhism in general helps rationalize, understand deeper Christianity and the path that is laid out for a Christian. It's very easy to, yes, focus on like sins and the process of elimination of sin or whatever. But I think when you take Buddhist perspective into this, you see, well, Christianity is just another way to achieve freedom and a kind of enlightenment where you have achieved non-dual state. You are in a grace of God. You become like a baby, like child of Christ, whatever. You no longer have to think about sin because you are in the path. You are in the righteousness, whatever. You are free from these negative um, uh, thoughts, delusions, or whatever. So, I mean, part of the reason, like I was also brought as Orthodox Christian for most part, and the just Christianity as a doctrine easily raises many questions and that are not very straightforward to answer, and having like Buddhist perspective helps resolve a lot of this and puts in a different not different, but I would say in a better light, in a less of a dramatic but more liberating kind of framework, and yeah, and it helps to integrate all the teachings that we hear like together and have a better like I think more deeper, but at the same time like less burdensome attitude to what is expected and what are we going through and all that.
Okay, thank you.
So
So
I think
there's a different narrative in
yeah,
place.
yes.
The narrative, the story, and the Old Testament and Western philosophy, it seems, or Western religion seems to be, of retribution and so on like that, and guilt and so on like that is the motivator. Whereas in the Eastern traditions, it's happiness and it's taking care of each other, and it's got a whole different narrative about it.
Lance, as Buddhists, we don't have to try to explain away the God of the Old Testament that orders entire races to be slaughtered, for example. So we don't have that burden. And we don't have, as Catholics, we have the Gloria. We praise you for your glory. I got sick of praising a supreme being that would allow bone cancer in children and the Holocaust and that sort of thing. But as Buddhists, we don't have that baggage. We just have the Buddha, a fully enlightened being who wants to lead us out of misery, who wants to lead us to happiness. We don't have a creator God to even have to be concerned about. That's what's beautiful to Buddhism about me. And here I go with direct comparisons again, which I keep telling myself I'm going to stop doing. So back to
Okay.
you. Yeah.
Kunga, you turned on your microphone a bit ago, and did you want to add something?
I was just thinking about that that idea of punishment and sin. I mean, I think we as Buddhists we say that if you act unskillfully, if you act with anger, if you act with greed, if you act with ill will, then those same things will come back to you. That the we don't call it punishment, but we just say like actions bring like results. That's what karma is. And so the idea, I think, in Christianity is to avoid those negative actions because you're going to get punished later on down the road. And in Christianity, maybe the punishment is more of a after death. And where Buddhism, we would say that anything negative happening to you in this life is you're just experiencing some of that past negative karma ripening right now, and the not to, even though it's not gonna happen after your death necessarily. You may be experiencing negative things from behaviors right now. But there's another idea that as we continue to develop our practice, we just start to experience the world in a different way, in a way that we don't maybe see things dualistic anymore, in a way so that even if your neighbor seeing something really negative happening to you because of your practice may not experience it that same way. So there's just this changing of your perception and your experience of reality based on how your practice is developing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Bernie, you have your microphone on. Did you want to say something?
Well, I've had it on, and no, I didn't have anything particular to add to this particular subject. If we're talking about the merit, want me to react on this, the superiority of Buddhism to other tradition. The idea, of course, in Buddhism is that it teaches what's necessary and it doesn't teach what isn't necessary. And I have no criticism with any religion which teaches universal love, because I consider that to be the essence of all the great religions, the idea that we should love everyone without exception. And I find that very much in the teaching of Christ. And I'm not familiar enough with the other scriptures, but I'm sure that it can be found in other scriptures too. Although it's a rare person who, in any religion, who really puts that into action. But there's two paths you can take in life. The first is path of service, the path of helping others, and then there's the path of wisdom. And ideally, the two need to come together. But different people have different aptitudes. Some people are more wise would not be the correct word, but more sharper intellects, and are able to appreciate the idea of enlightenment. And other people have great hearts, and they can really appreciate the path of service. So that's how I look at it. That's how I look at the different religions. And a lot of the stuff.
Bernie, I think, did you stop speaking or did you lock up there? I think he locked up.
Lance, it sounds like he was referencing something in one of the chapters in Bhagavad Gita where they talk about the four pathways: the pathway of love, pathway of service, pathway of wisdom, and there's a fourth one. So, like, kind of, he was just saying he's describing two of them, but I know you have read the Bhagavad Gita many times, and they talk about the four ways to going back to basically a state of Buddhahood or God, whatever you want to call it.
The Godhead.
The Godhead, yeah. So I would say, I don't know if, and that's actually a good thing to contemplate about yourself, right? Which one are you more apt to lean towards from a self-reflection and contemplation perspective? Because then you can kind of align your dharma, like your daily activities and sadhanas, with that. Like, should you be reading more or should you be out there doing more things? So
I think it's interesting to think that Siddhartha Gautama had this this revelation, this realization, and so on, and recognized himself as Buddha and the propagator of his suffering or of his happiness, and realized that he was no different than anybody else. Nobody was different than he was, and that he learned through his life, through this, what we're reading here, particularly, these pages of his sitting on the cushion and being on the cushion for 7 days and another 7 days and all these things happening, and his walking, going to the to Varanasi, where he began to teach, to Sarnath, where he began to teach the four noble truths and so on, that he was going through changes of learning how to articulate what was happening within himself. And so the thing that made me think about that is that that's what we are doing ourselves. We're learning how to be able to communicate with other people. If we have a purpose in our life, if we have to deal with the we-go, the collective ego, and be able to help to guide our world to being a more peaceful world, a more generous world, and so on like that, that we have to develop a way to be able to communicate that. And he's an example, the Buddha was an example of how to do that. It was a series of presenting, coming forward, and then coming back, and then going forward and coming back. And he was refining as he went through each of these stages and so on. And it becomes, an affirmation for us that that's what we need to do. We all have our own background. We all have our own families. We all have our circle of friends and so on. And, we know how to respond to that, or we should know how to respond to that. And what we're learning to do is how to do that. Your way is going to be different than mine, and mine's going to be different than somebody else here, and that's going to be different from somebody else, because it's dependent on the circumstances of those individual communities, those individual families, and so on. So I think that was one of the teachings of the Play in Full, was learning how to develop your Dharma, how to articulate the Dharma. We have an example, and now we have to tailor it to our own situation.
Okay, just wanted to say I lost my internet connection for a while.
Yes.
That's why I disappeared.
Yes.
Sometimes happens when it rains. So.
Okay. Did you want to finish what you were talking about?
No, I lost my train of thought when my internet connection went down. Just want to say that we need to practice morality, meditation, and wisdom, and I'm just so very happy that one of the great accomplishments during my lifetime is that more people know about meditation and are practicing meditation, not only in Buddhism, but in all religious traditions. But I would raise a caution in that people who are practicing meditation sometimes do it for egotistic ends, but better meditation than no meditation at all.
Yes, thank you. So the point I was just raising about, that we're learning how to articulate our experience for the benefit of the liberation of other beings and so on. And that's part of our role of being in the we-go, for the sake of helping other beings.
Lance, are you saying we go?
Yes.
Are you being silly?
No, I mentioned before that I just finished reading this book that spoke about, our individual ego, but then also put it in the context of the we-go of the community, of all other beings and so on.
Collective consciousness?
The collective consciousness, calling it the we-go.
I like that.
Yes.
Lance, is that like uh, George Harrison and his song on Sergeant Pepper, where he talks about if they only knew that we're all the same, that we're all one,
Oh, absolutely.
with and without you. That's
Yeah. George Harrison was a great teacher for me. Absolutely. I mean, he as much as anybody else introduced me to the Bhagavad Gita.
I mean, I wasn't wanted to add that just studying this sutra, I mean, gives anyone a lot of, so to speak, ammunition, if you want, or background, to speak about Buddhism with more authority and with more kind of, well, definitely deeper point of view, deeper knowledge of how things are transpired, with Buddha himself and what he was actually teaching. So a lot of other things that we hear is kind of like story about a story about a story. So something being retold, from through cultures, through times. But here is a very direct, kind of almost factual um, account. It's of course is in a tone of poetic. It is in enveloped in very extravagant language and sometimes speaks more to our imagination and uh, kind of emotions maybe rather than uh, factual or logical um, elaboration on facts. But and that's why it is a play. It's not it's not a treatise, or it's not a um, uh, just
Oh,
a
that's right.
dry dharma, dry text, dry philosophical expounding and text, or teaching. It is a really a work of art, in a way, a work of spiritual art, we can say.
And it
That
makes it very relatable. That we can relate to all the different facets, aspects, and so on like that. And we can see the interdependence of ourselves with the Buddha's experience, but also everyone else's experience.
and and in a way it also opens our own uh, horizon in a way that sometimes it mentions something that's definitely cannot be encountered, or definitely cannot be created, but but activating our mind into thinking that what if that was possible? What if that is indeed so? So, once something is an idea, there is more things that can really transpire as a real happenings. And I think there is a lot of value in that I see in the sutra. So in that way, we can think of others and ourselves much greater, much diverse, uh, more fascinating, more elaborate than we ever could do, because well, either Buddha or somebody else who was writing this from Buddha words, did the job for us of stimulating our imagination and inspiration.
Well, I think that's right. And I think you hit on a good word, that we're not creating this. This is the human condition. This is the human dynamic, and we're recognizing it.
And we're creating it at the same time.
Yes, and what I was going to say that we now have more ability to create because we now have more things that we can imagine. There are lots of things unimaginable that were for me before reading this sutra. Now I say, oh yeah, somebody can imagine things to be this way, and yeah, it engages your mind and makes it work a new way.
Very good. Yes. Well, we're getting close to the end. Does anybody have any comments you'd like to make before we sign off tonight? I think a lot of really provocative thoughts, contemplation.
I guess I would add on to what Alex was saying that the sutra does a really great job of elaborating on the reality that we normally experience and broadening our scope. And in that way it kind of points a mirror back at us and shows how we're limited by what we by our senses, by what we can see what we can see, we can hear what we can hear, smell what we can smell, taste what we can taste. But we know that there's a lot more out there. I mean, there's microscopes, there's telescopes, there's different ways of measuring light. There's a whole universe out there that we can't appreciate with our senses the way they are. And then the scripture kind of gives us a whole Buddhaverse that you can only experience through your spiritual eye, right? So it's really good. It does a great job of bringing that forward and bringing out that scope, that vast array, which is really like impossible to visualize just with our normal everyday. I mean, you can't even just seems it's you can't even I don't know. That one of the in the Buddha Shakyamuni visualization practice at the end, it says that every day you should go ahead and recite one of the sutras that's important to you, and it lists the sutra, right? Like you could recite the sutra every day. It's so immense. But I think that's really where it for me, that's where the sutra shines. That ability to provide this exposure to a spiritual reality so much deeper and profound than maybe our everyday mundane experience. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else like to make a comment?
Thank you for being our leader, I guess, in doing this. This was a lot of work, Lance, so thank you.
Well, congratulations to you, to all of us, for doing this, and not just getting through it, as a some exercise, but it was really it was a journey, and it was something to recognize our trip, to recognize who we are, the potential of who we are, and I think as time goes on and we reflect back on this, we'll see how this will continue to sustain us in times when we're not sure what we're doing. We, go back and look at the table of contents and say, oh, well, I'm at some kind of a crossroads or something. Maybe I need to look into this a little bit again, and a reference book. So I'm sure that's going to happen and with many of the other sutras and so on.
I have a question, Lance. Like, do you have a suggestion of what might be the next thing to read? You know, maybe not in this setting, but like on our own.
Well, I sent you in the last group of books that I sent you the King of Samadhi, the first two books of the King of Samadhi, and
Uh-huh.
that's what I would recommend because that takes you into the mind of the thus gone one, into that samadhi, into that state of mind, into that post meditation that you take with you, and so on. And the very last page of book two is the teaching of samadhi,
Mhm.
and it's very, very powerful. And so that's what I would recommend. And I hope that sometime in the not too distant future we can study that together. That would be a plan. But then with Geshe Larampa Jampa kind of, materialized for us, and the time is right, so we're going to engage with him. And I think that will be very good for everybody, and maybe expand, where we've been talking. He brings in a whole library, if you will, of scripture and understanding and experience that, as lay people, we miss by ourselves. But I think that engaging with him is going to be really, really great. So I'm looking forward to that very, very much. And
Thank
I
you.
hope that you have friends that you want to invite, will be really good.
Dorje, do you think it would, I know we do, aspirations at the beginning of each session and we say aspirations at the end. Um, would it be possible to have a PDF that we could share with people so that people who link in, join in for the class can also get an email, the PDF of where the prayers are, so that when we do that parts, they're able to follow along.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Prayers to be distributed. Okay.
And if it's just electronic, then there's no cost and people can just print them out themselves if they need them.
Yeah, that's fine. And we could even screen share them. That's a good idea. Thank you. Yeah. I'll talk with him about that, and I'm sure he'd be fine. It's only a question of which prayers we would use, So and they're the same prayers. It's just a slightly different translation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it'd
All
be
right.
good if, I know you're still organizing this, but if he's going to give like particular teachings, if there were, something that people, like a reference people could look at before the class, then they might be able to, think about, particular questions they might have. And sometimes it's hard to think of the questions when you're just getting all the information. But if you got the information before, and you've had time to think about it a little bit, then things that aren't explained in the actual talk, you might like, oh yeah, what I didn't understand what this meant. You explained it in this way, but what else, could it mean this also? They might have that kind of discussion. Sometimes it's hard. I think, here we've been doing the same scripture, so we know we've had a chance to look at things beforehand, so we have a chance to kind of formulate some ideas. But if we're getting things that are brand new, sometimes it's harder to come up with good questions when you're just getting the material for the first time. Thank you.
Well, I think it's a great idea, and I just gotta say this: it would be great to have some support, some help with that. If somebody wanted to take that on as, or at least for a while, part of their contribution to presenting this. Because it does take a fair amount of work and effort and everything to put these things together and so on. And if we can kind of distribute some of that responsibility around, would be very beneficial. So it's a gift to each of us to be able to do that. But I will
Yeah, I mean, if there were particular like sutra or teaching that he was going to talk about, and that was available online, I would be happy to locate something and and share that with you so that you could share it with people at the time of the thing or whatever.
All right, well,
Or
fair
and
enough.
I
I'll be talking with him in a couple days or so, and let's get an idea for the next 2 or 3 weeks, or when we begin with him, uh, what those topics might be, and then we can go ahead and have time to prepare those outlines at the very least.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, sometimes they're just doing a commentary on a particular teaching that already exists out there. So just providing people with the original teaching to look at before they hear what the commentary is.
Well, he's
Yeah.
most interested in the discussion.
Okay.
That's his interest in being able to engage in discussion, and that's what we've been developing here. Years ago, before you joined us, and I know a number of people here could testify to this. It was more like a lecture, and then there was some discussion afterwards, and sometimes no even time for discussion, and then we finally said, well, let's make it always have a discussion, and it really seemed to there was greater interest and connection with it and benefit, I think. Would you agree with that, Zara?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think things are better when people can engage through question and answers. And actually, Kunga, you said something. Actually, I think I commented on WhatsApp. You said through sometimes people don't even know what their thoughts are or what their opinion is until someone asks, and then they can formulate their ideas out loud. I think you said that last week. I was watching the YouTube and was like, oh, you're right. And our Sangha is a safe place, right, of where we can go through these things in a humble way with each other, without it being like, oh, that's so prideful, or how dare you, that seems hatred, or whatever. So I think you mentioned that, about people sometimes not even knowing until they're asked. And Lance, you do a great job of asking indirect questions to help us really contemplate. So
All right, well, very good. And I will take that and discuss that. So
I
thank you.
just happy to follow your lead, Dorji. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much, and this has been wonderful. So these next couple of weeks, we'll have some follow-up. We're going to continue our Monday night meetings because I don't want to stop, because if we do, that's when we tend to lose people. So let's keep it going, and I don't know what I'd do on Monday night if we didn't have something. So, but anyway, so I'll let you know what we're going to talk about next week, and in the meantime, we will do our dedication. By the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Sri Kongpa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation, until the end of samsara and all the other great masters. Om, Ah, Hung. Om, Ah, Hung. Om, Ah, Hung. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night.
good night, you all.